Hey everyone, me Kevin here. Nancy Pelosi has been re-elected as Speaker for the next 2 years. We have 3 million active cases of COVID right now, or 1% of our entire population sick with COVID right now. Mark Meadows is meeting with Mitch McConnell, and Democrats are pushing for a smaller stimulus package. Let's talk. A quick reminder, though, to use that Black Friday month coupon code that will expire once Black Friday rolls around, which is coming up sooner than we think. And of course, you could still email me for a bundle coupon code. Now, just a heads up, if you emailed me yesterday, I am way behind on my emails, but I will be catching up today. Shoot me an email at kevin@meetkevin.com if you're interested in bundling multiple courses. Okay, folks, yesterday, Democrats demanded that Republicans return to the negotiating table in both speeches and letters. We talked about that in detail yesterday, which ironically, at the same exact time, it's almost like they're having conversations to each other in the media, but refusing to actually go to the table. Multiple Republicans said, please, Democrats, return to the negotiating table. It does seem like both Republican and Democrat representatives and senators realize we need another stimulus package desperately prior to the end of the year. Right now, we're just waiting for one side to break and actually introduce something that could be palpable for both sides. Right now, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, with the support of Joe Biden, are hanging on the HEROES Act. At the same time, which, by the way, that's that $2.2 to $2.4 trillion deal we talked about yesterday, how, there are definitely some things in there that kind of make you scratch your head, like, why is that in there? You know, that pisses Republicans off, obviously. But on the flip side, Mitch McConnell told us yesterday that indeed he is interested in the $500 billion skinny bill, which is a paltry reduction of an amount in terms of where negotiations were just 3 weeks ago when Republicans were closer to a $1.9 trillion deal. This now begs the question, what will a new compromise proposal actually look like when it comes to stimulus? Well, on this, most fingers are pointing to the Problem Solvers Caucus proposal, which you might not remember the Problem Solvers Caucus proposal, so here's a quick rundown of it. This is from back in September, so some of the things are going to have dates that kind of look old at this point. But back in September, we saw the Problem Solvers Caucus proposal was around $1.5 trillion, with possible escalators up to 1.9. It would actually include 2 rounds of stimulus checks, which was really incredible, a second round of PPP funding, and $50 billion for those EIDL grants again, unemployment pay of $450 per week as a sort of, compromise. A lot of this bill was a compromise. Remember, it was put together by 25 Republicans and 25 Democrats, the proposal. Credits for employee retention credits. This is a big Democrat priority. Fixing the Main Street lending program. It's broken. Aid for elections and staffing. Well, that can go now. $25 billion, though, for rental assistance. Student loan forbearance. That date would probably get changed a bit. Food aid is also in here, a big Democratic priority. Money for broadband. State and local government funding. We've got $500 billion was authorized for state and local government funding, with possibly minus $130 billion if things got better, which we might end up seeing, states not need a full $500 billion. So something like this just looked so wonderful. You've got $130 billion for money for schools, liability protections with OSHA protections. I mean, literally everything where Democrats had an issue, solved. Things where Republicans had an issue, solved. Unfortunately, Nancy Pelosi said in response to, hey, what do you think about the Problem Solvers Caucus proposal? She goes, that's nice. Not so good. Not so good at keeping this negotiation moving forward. The Problem Solvers Caucus proposal was a wonderful proposal. It is worth noting, though, that the Washington Post editorial board, which leans left, is now urging Democrats to take a smaller proposal, saying that Democrats did not sweep the way they expected they would, and now is the time to take a smaller proposal, cut the fat, and get the stimulus out that we need. This is being echoed by multiple moderate Democrats. We know that both sides are clamoring for a deal. We do not expect a skinny proposal to get through the Senate. Mitch McConnell and Mark Meadows are also meeting this morning in person. This comes after Mark Meadows, the White House chief of staff, had COVID, and he has now recovered. Both of them are expected to be talking about their strategy for a stimulus plan moving forward. Keep in mind that we were expecting the Senate Republicans to introduce or at least have another vote on a stimulus package this week. Unfortunately, that was initially expected to be the HEALS Act. Now it's expected to be the skinny proposal of around $500 billion. That won't get us anywhere, which means Congress is likely to go on recess again for Thanksgiving before we end up seeing them actually and potentially come to a compromise bill maybe in December. Though again, remember, moderates and Democrats are now pushing to come off the heavily inclined $2.2 to $2.4 trillion proposal. Bring this down, strike a deal, and get support out the door. We've got too many fiscal cliffs coming at the end of the year. Unemployment, evictions, Main Street loans, credit facilities, student loan forbearance, a lot of things come to an end at the end of this year. And unemployment comes to an end earlier than we expected. It comes to an end the day after Christmas. That is the 26th of December, because that's the way the calendar works in terms of the last unemployment check that will be delivered until unemployment gets cut off. Nancy Pelosi today, by the way, has been reelected as Speaker of the House for the next 2 years. And in her acceptance speech, she said the theme of what's next is justice for our economy, justice for passing the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, justice in our environment, and justice in healthcare. This comes as Congress has just 18 working days left this year. The George Floyd Justice in Policing Act, by the way, prohibits racial profiling at all federal, state, and local levels. It also limits qualified immunity as a defense for police officers and makes reforms to track police violence and to more easily criminalize it. On the election, Rudy Giuliani, who's spearheading efforts for Trump's legal work in fighting the election results, is reportedly requesting $20,000 of pay per day for his work. Yet the Associated Press reported this morning that Giuliani made several hours of arguments in a Williamsport, Pennsylvania court today, but the press said most of his arguments were unsubstantiated and without evidence. The Trump campaign is also expected to spend $3 million to request a partial recount in Wisconsin. Yesterday, we also saw Wayne County in Michigan briefly fail to certify election results when 2 Democrats voted to certify the election results, but 2 Republicans voted not to. This was quickly celebrated by Trump and Trump's team as a victory, but 2 hours later, that Michigan county ended up certifying the election. Trump also fired the director of cyber and infrastructure security after the director vouched for good 2020 election security. Now, I do want to make a quick note that yesterday there was a Breitbart article circulating that said thousands of fraudulent ballot applications were submitted. This was really interesting. It was an interesting read. Now, obviously, Breitbart leans pretty far right, but in their article, they actually linked to an NBC article. And the NBC article said, from NBC LA, they said that, hey, even though these thousands of fraudulent applications were submitted, all of those applications were flagged as fraudulent applications, and that's what led to those people's arrests, and no illegal ballots were cast in that one scenario. You know, I'm not making claims here or whatever about the rest of the election. I'm just saying, like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. In that one scenario, you've got people who are really trying to commit fraud. I mean, I think they submitted up to 8,000 fraudulent ballot applications. But every single one of those got flagged, and that's what led to these people's arrest. And now they're facing potentially 15 years in prison for fraudulent ballot applications. It's shocking. I mean, it's sad to see that kind of stuff actually exists. But in this one scenario, who knows about the rest of the election, we'll see. But in this one scenario, it's good that was caught. Nobody wants to see fraud. On COVID, we currently have 3 million active cases of COVID. That means 1% of the entire population is infected with COVID right now. Not even in the past, literally infected right now. At the same time, the FDA has just authorized a stay-at-home test for COVID. I'm sure it'll be weeks before we actually have the opportunity to buy this, if not months. Although this is good news on the war of COVID. Speaking of the war of COVID, we also have a war of vaccines. Pfizer initially said that their vaccine is more than 90% effective. Russia then said that their vaccine is 92% effective. Then Moderna said their vaccine is 94.5% effective. Now Pfizer says it's ours, by the way. Forget the whole more than 90% effective. We're actually 95% effective. The New York Times this morning reported that vaccines may also be effective for years. This is extremely good news, as we were worried that the vaccine might not even last 6 months. Years is very good. Obviously, a booster shot is expected either at intervals of every year or every 2 or 3 years. We'll see, but that is good news. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, the former FDA commissioner, believes that with 2 vaccines with over 90% effectiveness, we can effectively end this pandemic if people take the vaccine. Remember that Dr. Fauci believes we need 75 to 80% of people taking the vaccine to actually end COVID. Gallup poll released a poll. Imagine that. That was taken between October 19th and November 1st. In this poll, 58% of Americans now say they would consider taking the COVID vaccine. What's actually really fascinating about this is that poll, or the survey, was done before the election, and it was also done before the vaccine news. So it's quite possible that maybe 70-80% of the population will now consider taking the vaccine. I'm curious to know, will you be taking the vaccine? Let me know. We're at also 159,508 cases. We're up 79% over the last 14-day average. This morning in my private live stream, we were talking about that a little bit, that usually on Wednesdays we see a larger count, which obviously 159 is large relative to the past few months. But it's not that massive spike that we saw last week. It'll be interesting to see what Thursday, Friday, and Saturday bring. Those are usually the days we see substantially larger spikes. Deaths today are up at 1,583, up 38% on a 14-day average. There you have the update for today. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to use that coupon code. Email me if you're interested in that bundle. And folks, we will see you next time.